Today I'm going to tell you about 3 technologies, and the thing they all have in common is this. Every one of them is available on the market right now, every one of them is completely legal, and the price of each one is less than what the average person spends on coffee in a week. But when you combine all 3, you become completely independent from centralized infrastructure, digital monitoring systems, and supply chain dependency in a crisis scenario. And that is precisely why these products almost never appear in mainstream preparedness content, in big brand survival kits, or in the major prepper channels, because these products do not keep you dependent on a system. They take you outside of it. This video is not a conspiracy theory, it is an engineering evaluation, and I am going to present each product to you grounded in real technical data, military usage history, and independent field testing. Because at this channel, I believe that being prepared is not panic, it is engineering thinking. Yes, before we get into the list, I need to say this. The single biggest mistake most preppers make is that they choose their technology based on brand recognition rather than operational need. And the difference between buying a $500 solar energy kit and storing it unintegrated at home versus buying a $50 compact solar charging panel and using it every single day can mean the literal difference between night and day in a crisis, because unoperationalized equipment is only marginally better than having no equipment at all. Now let's get to the first technology, and before I describe it, let me ask you this. How many years have you been interested in preparedness, and have you ever heard of this? Technology 1. Infrared barrier sensors and passive infrared perimeter alarm systems. When most preppers think about security, they think about either an expensive camera system or a basic magnetic door alarm. And between those two sits a category that is far less well known than either, but operationally outperforms both: passive infrared barrier sensors. How do these systems work? They consist of 2 components: a transmitter and a receiver. The transmitter emits an invisible infrared beam, and the receiver continuously monitors that beam. When the beam is broken, meaning a person or large animal passes between them, the system triggers and produces either an audible alarm or a silent vibration signal. This technology is known in the security industry as an active IR beam sensor, or photoelectric beam detector. And U.S. Army field security protocols have documented how these sensors are used as passive perimeter monitoring tools. Now let's ask the key question. What is the operational advantage of this technology over standard security cameras? First, energy independence. A simple infrared barrier sensor, once installed, runs on AA batteries for weeks and requires no grid electricity, whereas an IP camera system requires a constant power connection and internet infrastructure. Second, invisibility. An infrared barrier system from the outside appears to be nothing more than 2 small plastic boxes that are extremely difficult to detect. And this is a massive advantage from an operational security standpoint, because visible security systems sometimes not only deter intruders, but also give them information to adapt their approach around. Third, near zero false alarm rate. Passive infrared barrier sensors respond to the physical breaking of the beam, rather than to heat signatures, which means environmental factors like wind, falling leaves, or changes in ambient light do not trigger them. What is the average cost of this technology? Dual-unit infrared barrier sensor pairs sell for $15 to $25 on the market, meaning a perimeter system covering 4 separate entry points can be set up for $60 to $100, which is roughly 1/10 the cost of a mid-range security camera system. Yet its operational effectiveness in a crisis scenario is arguably higher across every metric that matters. The practical way to set this up within this week is as follows. Identify the entry points of your home or shelter, place 1 transmitter and 1 receiver at each door or passageway, connect the system to a vibration alert, and run a test. In a long-term scenario, meaning any crisis extending beyond 48 hours, this system continues monitoring your perimeter while you sleep. And that passive security capacity provides a life-saving operational advantage in situations where active watch is no longer possible. Technology 2, and the least well-known but highest value generating item on this list: manually operated shortwave receiver radios operating on HF and VHF bands. Now you might be thinking, I already know about radios, I have a walkie-talkie. But what we are talking about here is not a walkie-talkie, it is a shortwave receiver radio. And the difference between those 2 technologies is not just technical, it is an operational chasm. A walkie-talkie FRS or GMRS is a local communication tool with a range that typically runs between 1 and 3 kilometers. A shortwave receiver radio, by contrast, receives radio waves that have bounced off the ionosphere layer in the atmosphere, which means you can receive broadcasts from thousands of kilometers away with no infrastructure whatsoever. What does that mean operationally? In a grid collapse, a major disaster, or an extended crisis scenario where the internet is down, the GSM network has failed, and local broadcasts have been cut, shortwave radios continue operating because this technology is completely independent of infrastructure. A long-life battery with 50 to 100 hours of capacity, radio waves that continue existing in the atmosphere, and a receiver device are all you need to receive broadcasts from anywhere on Earth. From a historical perspective, the importance of shortwave radio in survival scenarios has been proven repeatedly. Throughout World War II, resistance groups in occupied Europe received vital operational intelligence from BBC shortwave broadcasts. During the Cold War, both superpowers designated shortwave infrastructure as the primary backup communication method for post-nuclear strike scenarios, and today, shortwave receiver use is still formally included in FEMA emergency communication protocols. The best value-to-cost shortwave receivers currently on the market sell for $35 to $70, and models in that price range cover SW, meaning shortwave, MW, meaning medium wave, and FM bands, with battery life ranging from 10 to 20 hours. And most include both a hand crank charging mechanism and a solar panel input, both of which are critical features for energy independence in a crisis. The mistake most preppers make here is this. They say, let me get an emergency radio and buy a cheap FM-only device, and those devices become completely non-functional in a local crisis the moment local stations go dark. The correct approach is this. The only reliable way to access life-saving information in a crisis is a broadband shortwave receiver, and this technology delivers something that even $1,000 communication systems cannot match. Infrastructure independent, passive, low-energy, real-time information access. The concrete action for this week is straightforward. Today, go to a store or search online for shortwave receiver radio with SSB. Buy a model in the $35 to $70 range, put in the batteries, and spend 1 hour tonight scanning shortwave frequencies because buying this device is not enough. You need to learn how to use it, and frequency knowledge can be acquired in advance, not during a crisis. Technology 3, and the most surprising item on this list, the Faraday cage and EMP protection technology. When you hear that name, you are probably having one of two reactions. Either I already know about this, or this is a topic for extreme doomsday preppers. For those having the second reaction, here is a question. Has an electromagnetic pulse capable of permanently destroying your smartphone, your backup battery, your shortwave radio, your GPS device, and your flashlight been documented on Earth in the last decade? The answer is yes, and that is not my claim. That is the position of NASA's Solar Storm database and the U.S. Department of Energy's Grid Vulnerability Assessment reports. The 1989 Quebec solar storm took down a large portion of Canada's electrical grid within hours. The 2003 Halloween solar storm ranks among the most powerful solar activity events in modern recorded history. In 2012, a coronal mass ejection of comparable magnitude to the Carrington event passed Earth with a margin of approximately 9 days, which in astronomical terms is an extremely narrow miss. In this context, what is a Faraday cage and why is it so valuable? A Faraday cage is a conductive enclosure that prevents electromagnetic fields from penetrating its interior volume, and the operating principle was discovered by British physicist Michael Faraday in 1836. When an EMP, or a powerful solar storm, occurs, electromagnetic waves can permanently damage electronic circuits, microchips, and battery management systems. And the only practical way to protect against that damage is to place sensitive electronic devices inside a Faraday cage. There are two mistakes most people make on this topic. Mistake 1 is thinking that a Faraday cage is expensive or complex to build. This is completely wrong. This technology, known since the 1800s, can be implemented today using extremely simple and inexpensive methods. Devices wrapped in thick aluminum foil with an insulating layer between the foil and the device provide basic-level EMP protection. For a more robust solution, a galvanized steel trash can, widely recommended in preparedness literature as a Faraday cage alternative, creates a very strong EMP protection layer when the interior surface is lined with insulating material. And the cost of that trash can is $15 to $25. Mistake 2 is believing that EMP protection is only necessary for mega collapse scenarios. This is also fundamentally wrong because a short regional EMP event, a large-scale solar storm, or even an extremely powerful lightning strike can cause serious damage to nearby electronic devices. And if that damage occurs simultaneously with any other crisis scenario, your entire remaining communication, navigation, and energy infrastructure can disappear in an instant. Implementing this technology within this week requires almost no effort. Buy a galvanized steel trash can for $15 to $25. Line the interior with thin foam or cardboard as insulation. Place your shortwave radio, backup batteries, lithium batteries, and small solar charging panel and any other critical electronic devices inside, and keep the lid closed. Every device inside that can will be fully protected even if an EMP event occurs outside. When you look at all three technologies together, here is the complete picture. Infrared barrier sensors provide passive perimeter security and monitor your shelter while you sleep. The shortwave receiver radio provides infrastructure-independent information flow and makes it possible to know what is happening in a crisis. And the Faraday cage protects both of those technologies and all of your other critical electronic devices against an electromagnetic pulse. The total cost of all three is between $100 and $150. And this combination provides dramatically more real operational protection than the vast majority of $500 prepackaged survival kits on the market, because these three technologies were specifically designed for exactly the scenarios where infrastructure does not exist. They are infrastructure-independent systems by design. As I close this video, I want one concrete action from you. Which of these three technologies do you not currently have? If one is missing, buy it this week. If two are missing, buy the highest priority one first. And if all three are missing, at minimum, build the Faraday cage before this week is over, because this knowledge is in your hands today. And once a crisis begins, that window closes. At MrBuddy, we believe that real preparedness is not visible, it is operational, not expensive, it is intelligent, and not popular, and it is proven. All it takes to be 10 steps ahead is to start today.